I'm the last living cartoon, and I've been thinking about Centaurworld ever since my first watch. I've seen every episode of Season 1 3 times now, and it's dawned on me that this show is actually great. To be clear, it's uniquely inspired and there's nothing quite like it, but also on a structural storytelling level, it's layered and delicately crafted. If you've seen Centaurworld, you probably know what I mean, and if you haven't seen Centaurworld, well, that's why we're here. Centaurworld was released on Netflix on July 30th, 2021, and it has since received an abundance of positive reviews on aggregate review sites. It scored a 100% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, and also boasts a 92% audience review score, which is not an easy feat in the era of fun-hating troll mobs. Yet somehow, Centaurworld seems to have flown under the radar here on YouTube, a platform where literally anybody could say anything about it for any reason. There was some marketing by the Netflix Futures YouTube channel, including an art-focused featurette with series creator Meghan Nichole Dong, but for almost an entire month there was practically radio silence on the topic of this show. Thankfully though, this appears to be changing, and as more creators release videos on Centaurworld, I am become more creators and release video on Centaurworld. Here. What's so brilliant about this show might not be apparent from the premise alone, even though it's pretty original. A traumatized horse falls over the garden wall and discovers that friendship is magic while fighting a few Dark Souls bosses along the way. It's a musical. Unlike something like Adventure Time or Steven Universe, where the songs are more incidental or specific to an episode, Centaurworld's musical numbers often reprise themselves throughout the show. It's closer to classical musical theater, where the songs are a significant part of the character development and storytelling. Even the standalone ones advance character, and there are still plenty of those. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that Centaurworld is made by its music, rather than the music being an enhancement on a story that is mostly told without it. The closing song of Episode 1, Hello Rainbow Road, is a good example of just how much plot and character progression can be accomplished in a single number. The context of Hello Rainbow Road is that our protagonist horse needs to leave this valley in order to find her rider, who she has been separated from when she was transported to Centaurworld. Problem is, there's a dome-shaped force field around the valley created by Wamawink, a magical alpaca centaur who wants to protect her herd from the dangers of the outside world. Horse can't find her rider until she follows the Rainbow Road, and Wamawink won't let down the barrier until she knows her herd will be safe. The resolution of this conflict happens through the song, and it conveys so much important story information. The lyrics begin with Horse establishing what she and the audience have already learned about Centaurworld and Wamawink's herd. She can tell that they are bored and unfulfilled and would be able to leave much more exciting lives if they went beyond the valley. As the chorus kicks in, Horse begins to lead the main ensemble to the force field, while admitting that she can't do this alone. In purely practical terms, it's because she needs their magic to open the path forward, but the way the lyrics make her clarify that point implies a bit of understated vulnerability. A vulnerability that rises to the surface when Horse reaches the barrier and sings the refrain from Ryder's Lullaby, the first song we heard in the episode. The first song in the show in general, and a reminder of the bond between Horse and her missing companion. From here, the chorus of Hello Rainbow Road ramps back up as Horse repeats over lines, bracing herself for the danger ahead even as she captivates the centaurs. It's this beautiful moment of tension where the song threatens to crescendo endlessly until Wamawink finally sees eye to eye with Horse, removing the force field and allowing the journey into the unknown to finally begin. And as the music fades away, Horse gives a final haunted look back at the valley, showing that even she has second thoughts about sacrificing the herd's safety for the possibility of adventure. What is equally telling is that this brief expression of fear is not shared by Wamawink, who, as we come to find out in Fragile Things, the first song of Episode 2, is confident that she can protect the herd even outside the valley, provided they stay together and accept her help. Horse, of course, instigates a new conflict in this song, masking her own fear with lyrics about being brave and self-reliant. This leads into a duet where both characters argue their case for why the rest of the herd should follow them, establishing the dynamic that will inform Season 1's running theme of dependence. The other members of Wamawink's herd are introduced as codependent and a bit sheltered after spending so much time in a literal bubble, but Horse's insistence that she's not like that isn't all it's cracked up to be. Towards the middle of the season, Horse is asked through another song where food comes from, and her instinctive response is to perform a short trick that would signal Ryder to feed her. However, Ryder isn't there, and Horse has to reckon with the knowledge that she relied on Ryder the same way the other centaurs rely on Wamawink. The rest of the episode goes on to show Wamawink's strengths as a guardian, not by repeating character beats the songs already gave us, but by showing us Horse's limitations. The end result is an episode where Horse overcomes some of those limitations and goes through a pivotal change as a character, becoming closer to their ideal self in the process. Also, Wamawink water punches a bear tour with legally distinct JoJo music in the background, and it's the greatest thing I've ever seen. I haven't really touched on the rest of the supporting cast yet, but that's because all of them are two-dimensional characters worthy of their own analysis. Zulius is a dishy zebra tour whose vanity is offset by the fact that he's the most worldly and supportive member of the herd outside of Wamawink. Ched the Finch tour is brash and humorless, serving as a narrative foil for Horse as she grows out of those traits. Glendale is as twitchy and sensitive as the antelopes her design borrows from, and her urge to steal things just to level out her dopamine makes her a total wild card. And then there's Derpleton. He's Derpleton. You can absolutely see the passion that went into designing the herd in every moment the cast is on screen. The different colors and body shapes make each character stand out from the next and draw attention to aspects of their personalities. Meghan Dong has said that she had a lot of fun doodling these characters in sketchbooks before the show was even being animated, and this seems to inform the cartoony simplicity of some of the designs, especially Wamawink's. I honestly just love her look. She almost feels like a throwback to the early meme era, all the things, Bunchy, puking rainbows, that sort of stuff. Everyone under 20 just went to a different tab. The point is, Wamawink is good and wholesome, and I kin this creature. She's the embodiment of cautious optimism, and it's made apparent throughout the show that she's overcome a lot in order to reach this point in her life. Where do we even begin with the mythology of the Great War, the source of the forces that warped Horse's course endorsed by a remorseless, distorted Boris who's been caught between doors since the worlds were divorced? Spoiler warning, now enforced. The overarching seasonal plot of communing with the shamans to assemble an artifact that will reunite Horse with Ryder provides a tangible goal with easily tracked progression, but it also redirects the adventure away from blind exploration and gives the herd a chance to interact with all the most compelling people and places of Centaurworld. Among the memorable landmarks is the Moltor Court, a subterranean prison which is home to one of the aforementioned shamans, as well as the best boy of all time, Comfortable Doug. And don't worry, we'll get back to Comfortable Doug. As the great poet Jeff Airlines once said, diverse world building is when there's like different geographical landscapes and stuff. And on that front, Centaurworld is world building. I mean, come on, world is in the name. If it sounds like I'm being glib about this, it's only because actual world building is often misunderstood as an underlying prerequisite to good storytelling rather than an active function of it. The difference comes down to whether all that juicy lore accentuates the character's experiences and struggles or merely explains the backdrop upon which otherwise unrelated struggles take place. In fantasy stories especially, it's important that the obstacles the characters encounter aren't purely physical. There should be some metaphorical significance to everything, otherwise why even bother including these elements? The Wizard of Oz is a classic example of this, or at least the 1939 film adaptation is. When Dorothy Gale arrives in Oz, the movie doesn't just shift into color, it shifts into gear. She's overwhelmed with the introduction from characters that are as colorful in personality as the movie has now become. When the Munchkins come out to greet her, we see that there's a thriving community here, and that it's no place like Dorothy's home. There's a good witch and a bad witch as well, but they don't simply exist for the sake of themselves. Their presence in the narrative raises a question about Dorothy. Is she a good witch or a bad witch? While Dorothy would answer she's not a witch at all, her entrance into Oz caused the death of the Wicked Witch of the East. Consequentially, she's already done good by removing a bad witch from the world, but now she must wear the ruby slippers, which place her in a mortal conflict with another bad witch, whose life she will have to take if she wants to return home to Kansas. I could go on from there. The Wizard of Oz is a film with a lot of room for interpretation, but none of it begins or ends with a comprehensive history of the Lollipop Guild and how these three guys came to represent them. The same is true of Centaurworld. Everything, from the characters to the locations to the backstory, serves a narrative purpose. It's all meant to drive home a bigger point, which is, as I've alluded to throughout this, Horse learning that everyone depends on someone, and being dependable is the first step to finding your place in the world. It's no coincidence, then, that the longer Horse stays in Centaurworld, the more her art style begins to change, and after a show-stopping I Am song in episode 7, she fully becomes a cartoon. And while this is a traumatic moment for Horse, one that is painstakingly unpacked in the intense following episode, seriously, prepare yourself for that one, this is a necessary step for her. She's realized that who she has always been is not who she perceived herself to be. It's a revelation of self-awareness comparable to those experienced by another famous Netflix horse, but with a positive spin. In becoming a permanent resident of Centaurworld, Horse has also become herself. Her experiences with Wamawink, the herd, and the shamans have revealed things about her that she never would have known otherwise. But in leaving behind an old sense of self, one that she strongly associates with an important friend, it only makes sense that she'd be conflicted even as she acknowledges the value of her new relationships. Believe it or not, this is how we get back to Comfortable Doug, an eccentric Moltor who, against all odds, takes the entire show by the reins and finally convinces Horse to accept herself. His song, The Hero of My Story, parentheses, Comfortable Doug, distills everything about Centaurworld into a purely poetic expression of the themes and an outright celebration of the show itself. What? You don't believe me? What about this seems so hard to believe? I can't do justice to the Comfortable Doug dance, but the lyrics in the song talk about him always being called Comfortable Doug, but only recently becoming Comfortable Doug. And that has to be an intentional parallel to Horse's journey. I'm uncomfortable with the idea that it isn't. I didn't even mention Jebri the Ficus Tor, another recurring character that Horse initially mistook for Ryder at a distance because of his bipedal stance. Jebri is the least comfortable character in the show, always preoccupied with searching for a coat he never finds and feeling miserable in the cold as a result. My writer instincts are telling me that this is another thematic parallel to Horse, showing the consequences of staking all our future happiness on finding Ryder, but let's stick to the program. In The Hero of My Story, Comfortable Doug's response to Jebri's current lack of comfort can be read as somewhat dismissive, though his broader point is anything but. Doug says nobody is comfortable until we are all comfortable, meaning that Jebri has the potential to be comfortable, and that alone is enough of a reason to want him to become comfortable. That might be a struggle from an outside perspective because Jebri's discomfort is rooted in his self-perception, but that's where those who are already comfortable, already dependable and secure come in. In making this bold statement, Comfortable Doug shows the dichotomy between Horse and Wamawink for what it is, a false one, founded on polarized reactions to discomfort. Horse needed to learn to take the comfort of others into account, and Wamawink had to learn that she and the herd needed to sacrifice short-term comfort in the name of giving others a chance to find their own comfort. Their relationship is a dialectic, with Wamawink being the thesis, Horse being the antithesis, and the synthesis being the timeless wisdom of Comfortable Doug. And on that note, I'm going to end the analysis portion of the video here, because while I'd love to talk about the reveal of the Nowhere King and his role in the season finale, I feel that that's something best experienced firsthand, and I wouldn't want to ruin it for anyone. Instead, I'd like to address why I titled this video the way I did, because it was driven by a genuine curiosity I felt when I saw how little coverage this show had gotten in the couple weeks following its release. I didn't get it at first, but now I think I do. Centaurworld is a show exclusive to Netflix, and now that there are many more viable streaming services out there, that exclusivity actually has an effect on the size of the audience it can bring in. It's also a show with a cast of mostly non-human characters set in a brightly colored world, which aesthetically causes it to resemble shows for very young children, reducing its potential audience even further. At the same time, it's completely original and not connected to a franchise or pre-existing intellectual property, meaning that the incentive to check it out relies on the audience becoming aware of it and it being a thing for them in the first place, which itself is a hard bargain when the market is so oversaturated that even the original shows coming out across streaming services are starting to compete with each other for the attention of an audience that is increasingly spread thin and bled dry by subscription fees. How about all of the above? It's a mess out there. And this, all of this, is bad for art. It's bad for storytelling. As much as it would be cathartic to say that corporations did another big old bad and we were helpless to stop them, we have to take some responsibility as consumers, and recognize that now more than ever, we need to take chances on new original stories. Our brains might be fried from overstimulation on comic book movies and the ridiculous amount of seasonal anime that come out every year, but if we're not searching for our new favorites among things we haven't tried yet, how would we not become jaded? There are so many channels here on YouTube that pretend like all of modern storytelling can be reduced to the latest release from Disney or whatever 80s toy franchise reboot is in the pipeline at the moment, but that's so limiting when artists, animators, and writers, talented people, are working their fingers to the bone for that small chance that they'll be able to tell us their stories. To quote Anton Ego, the world is often unkind to new talent, new creations. The new needs friends. And fortunately, In spite of all these factors against it, Centaurworld's story is so genuinely good that the high-speed merry-go-round of the internet's attention economy has started to turn backwards in order to properly appraise it, even though the window for initial buzz has passed. And while it's too soon to say whether there will be a season 2, only good things can come from more people talking about this show and what it represents for Western animation. There's a sort of beautiful and terrifying quality to cartoons like Centaurworld, and that much isn't new. It was present in Adventure Time, and it carried over to the likes of Gravity Falls, Over the Garden Wall, Steven Universe, Star vs. the Forces of Evil, and Wander Over Yonder. It exists in a more fermented form in adult animation like BoJack Horseman, Tuca and Birdie, or even Rick and Morty. In the end, it's best understood as another dialectic. Thesis: we are all just fragile things. Antithesis: we can all be fearless too. Synthesis: Centaurworld.